Good morning, we're on the record. Good morning, as chairperson of the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Board for the District of Columbia, and in accordance with DC Code Section 2571HC of the Open Meetings Act, OMA, I am welcoming you to a public hearing to solicit comments on the Adams-Morgan Moratorium Zone rulemaking. This meeting has been conducted pursuant to guidance made available by the District of Columbia's Office of Open Government regarding electronic meetings held by public bodies. Electronic meetings by the ABC Board are authorized pursuant to Section 2577A of the DC Code. Pursuant to the OMA requirements, notice of today's meeting was provided 48 hours in advance of the meeting on ABCA's website and on the District Central meeting calendar. The notice includes the time, date, agenda, and call-in or login information for public participation. This electronic meeting has been hosted by a WebEx account provided by the District of Columbia government. Please address any questions or complaints to the OOG at opengovoffice@dc.gov. My name is Donovan Anderson. I'm chairperson of the board. I would like to introduce the other members of the ABC board who are also participating electronically. Please respond when I announce your name. Mr. James Short.
Mr. James Short, present.
Mr. Bobby Cato.
Bobby Cato, present.
Ms. Jenny Henson.
Jenny Hansen, present.
Mr. Edward Grandis.
Edward Grandis, present.
The board has 5 members in attendance for the conduct of business today, and that constitutes a quorum. Before we get underway with today's hearing calendar, I need to make a few instructions very clear so that the conduct of this hearing is understood by everyone. There are 2 cases actually on the calendar today, but we're having 1 case. So once your case is called, I will take a moment for IT specialists to elevate the rights for each party to enable their camera and microphone. Then and only then will you have the ability to enable your equipment. All right. So let's go on today's calendar, and there are 2 cases on today's calendar, but I will dispense of 1 case before. The second case that's on our calendar was scheduled for 1:30 this afternoon. So it's a protest hearing case number 23 PRO 00012, Union Oyster Bar and Lounge, license number 110747. This hearing has been continued to September 20th, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. So the case at hand, we have a public hearing. Good morning again, everyone. We're here today to take public comment on the renewal or expiration of the Adams-Morgan moratorium. By way of background, the board voted on February 1st, 2023 to adopt emergency rules to extend the existing moratorium. The initial emergency rules expired on June 1st, 2023, and the board adopted a second emergency rulemaking on May 24th, 2023. The board's adoption of the emergency rules was necessary to allow sufficient time to hold a public hearing and receive comment on the future of the moratorium. The emergency rules expire on September 21st, 2023. Notice of this hearing was published in accordance with DC Code Section 25353 and 25354. The notice was also published on the agency website and to the DC Register on March 24th, 2023. To date, we have received a resolution and testimony from the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, ANC, and Adams-Morgan Business Improvement District, and the Colorado Citizens Association. After hearing from persons who notified the board that they wanted to testify at today's hearing, all others who are present will be given an opportunity to testify. Each individual is allocated 5 minutes to speak. As a matter of fairness, so everyone has a chance to address the board, you will see on the screen there is a timer, and this timer will alert you to the 5 minutes that you have to speak. And I'm asking everyone to please adhere to the timer that is on the screen. The board members will then, so once you testify, the board members will then ask questions regarding the various proposals. If you have prepared written testimony for today's hearing and haven't already submitted them, please email them to abca.legal@dc.gov. Good morning. All right, good morning, everyone. Mr. Oriana, sorry, Mr. Oriana. Can you, I have on the witness list, so can you elevate the witnesses who are scheduled to testify today? And if it's possible, can you place the attendee list in the chat so the parties will know the order I will be calling the names?
Sure. Dennis James, your access has been elevated. John Stewart, your access has been elevated. Julie, your access has been elevated. Kristen Barden, your access has been elevated. Leslie De Legrand, your access has been elevated. Peter Wood, your access has been elevated. Ted Guthrie, your access has been elevated. That is all, Chairman.
All right.
Hello, is it my turn?
No, ma'am. Hold on a minute.
Okay, sure.
All right. Who's here from the bid? Is there someone here from the bid?
Yes, I'm
You
here.
are. Okay. All right, so the order I'm going to call, I'm going to start off with Mr. Wood from the ANC, then I'll have Dennis James, then I'll have Leslie Degron. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, ma'am. Then I'll have Kirsten Burden. Then I'll have Ted Guthrie. And then I'll have Jean Stewart. So that's the order I'll be calling. I'll be calling the names. If there's anyone else, if there's anyone else there, hold on, I'm sorry. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak, please identify yourself through the chat. Okay. So, so that's the order that I will be calling everyone. So let's start with Mr. Peter Wood from the ANC, please. And you have 5 minutes to speak, sir.
Hi, good morning. Forewarning, I did not know we had 5 minutes, so this is going to be maybe a bit choppy, but I'll do my best. And I did send a fuller, more thorough written testimony as well. So that will have
and I've read that, sir, yes.
So they'll have some more details. So, good morning. My name is Peter Wood. I'm an advisory neighborhood commissioner representing single member district 1CO3 in Adams Morgan. And I also serve as chair of Adams Morgan's ANC 1C. Today, I come before the ABCA ABC board to testify in favor of increasing the maximum permitted number of Class C tavern licenses within Adams Morgan. This testimony I share today was written by me, but represents our entire commission per a unanimous vote during our July 5th, 2023 meeting. So the Adams Morgan moratorium zone has had many iterations, but the first began 23 years ago in July 2000, when the ABC board ruled to impose a 3-year moratorium on tavern, restaurant, and nightclub liquor licenses involving the on-premises consumptions of spirits. According to then ABC board chair Roderick Woodson, quote, "A moratorium is a type of beginning, not simply an end. It is a beginning to a period of self-evaluation and prospective planning, to creating more congenial relations between commercial and residential interests," end quote. It is this spirit of risk assessment, trial and error, and adapting to an ever-changing city that we on the commission hope to emulate. Fast forward a little bit, and here we are today. Real estate vacancies and high business turnover persist. Progress has been made in spite of that, but opportunity exists to continue directing Adams Morgan toward an even more robust future. I'd like to now summarize the questions and concerns ANC 1C addressed over previous months. We had over, exactly 10 different publicly held meetings to discuss this with the community since December 2022. And also go over some of the key claims we made in our resolution and its corresponding discussion, and what goals we hope to see come to fruition. So our key questions and concerns: first, retail diversity. What is the ideal mix of business types in our neighborhood? Second, how to prevent, quote, bad actors from persisting. What tools are appropriate for ensuring businesses and their customers benefit for the community they exist within? Third, quality of life for nearby residents. And this is not an exhaustive list, but we covered things like vacant storefronts and business turnover, traffic patterns, parking restraints, noise pollution, waste management and rodent mitigation, pedestrian safety. Of course, the list could go on, but I think those are the big ones. The key claims that we made within the resolution that passed, also unanimously. First, that the moratorium zone has had detrimental effects. This is not to overlook how the moratorium might have helped curtail dangerous circumstances in its earlier days, or at least did not worsen matters. Instead, we see how a moratorium was not necessarily the only factor at play during that time, and that 2 decades of extending the tavern license moratorium has contributed to a volatile business environment. Second, not all alcohol vendors are the same, and ANC 1C pursues a diverse mix of business types. We also have a realistic understanding of what retail trends have occurred over the past 20+ years in Adams Morgan. The goal to have a diverse, alcohol-independent local economy is perhaps laudable, but has proven very difficult to achieve. It's time we modify our expectations slightly. And third, other areas in DC have demonstrated that moratorium zones are not as desirable or effective as once thought. Multiple neighborhoods, including nearby U Street, have seen moratorium proposals fail or are considering recommendations to alter or eliminate current moratoriums. We believe this context is worth considering. Now, our key goals. First, increase the limit of tavern licenses allowed. It is worth clarifying that our recommendation of raising the limit to 25 was an arbitrary line drawn out of compromise. Additionally, calling for a limit to how many new licenses can be issued each year is an attempt to avoid a sudden rush of taverns. Most of our discussion since December 2022 has been between whether to fully support fully removing a tavern license cap entirely, or raising the cap modestly. Our resolution represents a middle ground position. Second, ABCA, ideally with support from other DC government agencies, will hold establishments more stringently to their settlement agreements and strategically increase penalties to promote stricter adherence to those agreements. We acknowledge, definitely, that liquor licenses are not the only factor in a neighborhood's commerce, and in some cases are merely a tangential element. This highlights a key flaw in DC's system. Not enough agencies carry out effective enough enforcement, and ABCA is often left alone to try. We support enforcement and wish to see sufficient resources dedicated to this. And third, continue current policies regarding nightclubs and restaurants. We support renewing the moratorium on nightclub liquor licenses. We also support having no limit on how many restaurant liquor licenses can be issued in Adams Morgan. There are notably at least two points that we did not discuss at great length that have previously been explored by both ANC 1C and this board. And those are geographical boundaries of a moratorium zone. We've taken no position on whether the current policy, I believe it's an 1,800-foot radius from Trist, at 2459 18th Street Northwest. If that's desirable or ought to be adjusted, we haven't really discussed that. And duration of extension, we have also taken no position on how long a modified moratorium and renewal ought to last, should one take place. So just to conclude, let's return to former ABC chair, board chair, Woodson's words from 2000. A moratorium is only a beginning from which deeper assessment is undertaken and acted upon. It is our view as commissioners that 23 years is ample time to conduct this assessment. Rather than recycling the same admittedly temporary measure, I have one sentence left, of limiting tavern licenses, we feel now is an appropriate moment to grow our neighborhood even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. James, good morning, sir. I cannot hear you, Mr. James. You need to unmute your microphone, sir.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. First time on WebEx for me, new computer and all that. So thank you for holding this hearing this morning. The big question for the board is, I'll start over. The KCA and 171 residential neighbors filed a petition yesterday seeking renewal of the existing conditions with one slight exception, not for 3 years, but for 5 years. We put forth a case that the appropriateness requirements are invoked by the conditions on the ground, peace, order, and quiet, including noise and trash, negative impact upon residential parking needs, vehicular and pedestrian safety, and we claim that there is overconcentration within the Adams-Morgan moratorium zone. The board merely needs to find that that is reasonable, and have this board and its previous iterations having approved similar rules 5 different times has no reason to change that. We're on a course that is unfortunately a very slow process of improving the commercial areas by allowing restaurants, and with the typical sort of, 50% of restaurants fail within the first 2 years, that kind of thinking, and then the difficulties brought on by the COVID, coronavirus, COVID, what did I say that? The coronavirus epidemic, that hurt a lot of businesses and made things more difficult, but that is over now. And we've had numerous new restaurants come in the last 6 months or so. I think it's about a dozen. And that trend should be allowed to continue instead of having taverns go into those spaces. Taverns, it does say that food is required, but there's no measurable amount. And that can be satisfied by potato chips on the bar. And we don't need any more of that. We have 16 existing taverns. A few of them are among the worst businesses in the city, in my belief. One of them, I'll mention the words heaven and hell, has been before this board so many times and has such a long investigative history. It's a wonder that they're still around. Anyway, we can only do so much at the community level. The Calorama Citizens Association adopted a policy in 2000 with the first moratorium that we would support moratorium and we would seek settlement agreements with every on-premise licensee that came to the neighborhood. And that has been done. The moratorium is really all we have to prevent things from getting a lot worse in our neighborhood. If we had 9 new taverns, and admittedly it would happen over time, but where would they go? There's sort of a real movement towards new restaurants. There, in front of the ANC's ABC committee last night, 4 new restaurants were discussed. And that doesn't even count a couple that are coming along now, which are in the early stages of applying. For instance, City Lights of China and the Mintwood Place space will be occupied again when the owner, comes up with his new concept and rebuilds the interior. So there will be very few locations. So that could very well mean that taverns will go into not such great locations, perhaps, inappropriate locations. That would depend on when and where, and I don't know what the answers to that is. But particularly, the board must protect residents against the existing restaurants seeking to flee their requirements and go to become a tavern. That way, I think the bid wants, more taverns because that will help in their payments because they're getting no taxes out of empty storefronts. So that would make more money available to the bid. And I would just say, while I've mentioned the bid, that 8 of the 15 board members are either ABC licensees or landlords of ABC licensees. So, you really can't, the bid is not legally able to seek a moratorium. They're free to comment, and their individual members are also free to comment. As to the ANC, the process was very, very bad. The commissioners, 2 who are holdover commissioners from the previous iteration, I honestly believe they were hoping that the moratorium might just slip by and expire and therefore die. They didn't want to increase the time for the neighborhood to discuss the matter. They fought against that among themselves in December of 22, and they've been very aggressively against residents who spoke up to comment. I would say that of perhaps 50 comments that they received from residents, 1 was in favor of getting rid of the moratorium. I wonder if I might have 1 more minute.
I already gave you 6 minutes, sir.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. I talked too much. Well, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
All right,
And
I'm going to have some questions to ask at the end, but I gave you an extra minute, but I guess you weren't keeping track of the time. All right.
No, I'm too busy trying to keep my thoughts in order. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. All right, we'll have Leslie. I'm sorry, can you, Miss Delegan?
Yes, that's how you pronounce it. Thank you very much.
And can you also just spell your name also for the court reporter, please, too? And do you have a cameraman? I would like to see who was speaking, if that's possible.
I just turned it on.
That's fine. So can you please also spell your name for the court reporter and what organization you're from?
Leslie, Leslie, Delagran, Delagran. I do not represent an organization. I'm a long-term resident of the 1800 block of Wyoming Avenue Northwest. I've been on Wyoming Avenue for 30 years. So our life here predates the moratorium. We remember the bad days of broken bar bottles and wild nightlife. I think that the moratorium has benefited the community. I think that there are still too many taverns. 16 is more than enough, and I do not see the reason that the ANC is putting forward for increasing the number of taverns. The study that they cite to is 10 years old. It dates from 2013. It's sponsored by the business community. It relies on anecdotal evidence, as far as I can see, and it assumes that there's no new restaurant licenses. So it's fundamentally flawed. Peter talked about U Street and how that is somehow a success story. All I know is the number of people, friends of ours, who have left U Street. It is just too noisy. They can't live there anymore. We have ongoing problems with trash on our front sidewalk. Every weekend morning, I'm out there cleaning up. The other night, I was looking out the window at midnight. There was a pile of trash, and there was enormous rats running all over it. I was horrified. I don't think that we should have to live with cleaning up others people's mess, but I guess that's what you get. My biggest concern is that the taverns attract a party scene, and by giving the green light to more and more taverns, you're basically giving up on the neighborhood and saying we can't attract daytime retail, we can't have a vibrant community, we can't have bakeries, we can't have retail that appeals to residents. We just need more bars. More bars are not what residents want. Residents want daytime dining, they want bakeries, they want hardware stores, and this is basically giving up. So that's my concern, is that having a party scene goes to personal safety. The altercation and murder last December was a real wake-up call to the fact that, not that I'm a party goer, but I'm not going to go out on 18th Street after dark. I mean, that has really put an end to it. And that's, I'm sure, what many in the community feel as well. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. Sorry, it's not a prepared testimony, but I'm happy to take questions as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, so we'll have Miss Christine Burgeon.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Please spell your name and identify yourself for the record, please.
Sure, I'm Kristen Barden. It's Kristen Barden. Okay, I'll get going. I'm here today to express my strong support for the resolution adopted by ANC 1C to increase the number of allowable tavern licenses in the Adams Morgan moratorium zone, but to encourage the ABCA board to consider removing the AAMZ altogether, except for the prohibition on nightclub licenses. I have been the executive director of the Adams Morgan Partnership, AMP bid, since 2008. And the AMP bid, like the other bids in DC, is funded mostly through a special assessment tax on the commercial properties in Adams Morgan. The special assessment tax is based on the commercial value of the building and not based on occupancy or tenancy. It's based solely on the commercial, on the assessment value that's determined by OTR. The Adams Morgan Partnership Business Improvement District is a nonprofit organization focused on enhancing the quality of life for businesses, commercial property owners, residents, visitors, and employees in the District of Columbia's most vibrant and eclectic neighborhood. The partnership provides daily street cleaning, fun neighborhood events, and creative marketing and economic development initiatives. I believe that this resolution will have a positive impact on the neighborhood and contribute to its continued growth and vitality. Our board of directors passed a resolution on November 8th, 2022, requesting the ABRA board, prior to the name change, vacate the AMMZ, except for the restriction on nightclub licenses, CNDN licenses. The resolution adopted by ANC 1C to increase the number of allowable tavern licenses to 25 to be phased in with no more than 4 new licenses each year is a step in the right direction, but we would argue it doesn't go far enough to leveling the playing field. The current AMZ is the result of various renewals since 2000 and amended to reflect the changing needs of the Adams Morgan commercial area and surrounding community. The AMZ was found to limit the economic development of the Adams Morgan commercial corridor. That's the report from the DC Fiscal Policy Institute that was previously referred to. Specifically, the report stated, quote, Adams Morgan's commercial area is growing far more slowly than other non-moratorium parts of the city, faces stagnation and system vacancies, has not resulted in the expansion of non-restaurant retail, while at the same time making it harder for new ABC establishments to enter the marketplace, and has not directly improved peace, order, and quiet, but other steps taken have improved those issues. As the DC FPI report found, the appropriate approach is to target problem establishments, regardless of license class. And the targeted action, rather than a blanket moratorium, is the more appropriate action. And there are mechanisms in place with the current regulations to take targeted action, such as through settlement agreements. Additionally, the moratoriums in DuPont Circle, Georgetown, Glover Park, all have either been dramatically modified or removed entirely. Additional attempts to establish moratorium zones that took place in the Trinidad and U Street neighborhoods have both failed. The one successful creation of a new moratorium zone in Langdon Park was specifically focused on preventing nightclubs and nothing more. Adams Morgan has long been known as a vibrant and diverse neighborhood, attracting residents and visitors with its rich heritage, thriving local businesses, and a lively entertainment scene. However, the existing moratorium on tavern licenses has created unintended consequences that hinder the community's ability to evolve and adapt to changing needs and demands. I know that Lost City Bookstore would love to acquire a tavern license and offer beer and wine at book talks, but are unable to do so with a moratorium on tavern licenses. Not only is it cost prohibitive, but they would have to wait for a tavern license to become available when another business closes. By increasing the number of allowable tavern licenses, we can create a more inclusive and diverse social landscape that caters to a broader range of interests and preferences. This will foster an environment that encourages entrepreneurship, innovation, and healthy competition, all of which are essential for a thriving local economy and more sales taxes for DC government. Furthermore, it is important to note that the resolution adopted by ANC 1C has been carefully considered and is backed by extensive community input and engagement. The ANC has worked diligently in the past 7 months to gather feedback from residents, local businesses, and other stakeholders. I have full confidence that an increase in tavern licenses, perhaps the elimination of the AAMZ, except for nightclub licenses, accompanied by the existing effective regulations and oversight from ABCA, will not only preserve the unique character of Adams Morgan, but will also enhance its overall appeal to entrepreneurs, residents, and visitors. The resolution aligns with the evolving needs and desires of our community, and I believe it will contribute to the neighborhood's long-term success. In conclusion, I strongly urge the ABCA board to support the resolution to increase the number of allowable tavern licenses at a minimum, and perhaps remove the AAMZ, except for nightclub licenses. And by doing so, we can foster a dynamic and inclusive community that embraces growth, encourages entrepreneurship, and provides residents and visitors with a diverse array of social and cultural experiences. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your commitment to the well-being and development of Adams Morgan.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so we'll have Mr. Guthrie. Please.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
I had to call in order to hear what you're saying, but I think that you're getting me over the feed.
Yes, I can hear you, sir. I can hear you. So.
Okay. Unfortunately, I didn't hear what anyone said before me because I was having technical problems. I'm Ted Guthrie. I'm former ANC member who participated in determinations of requested changes to the moratorium the last couple of times it's been renewed. I guess one of my principal concerns that I don't see really addressed by the material that came from the ANC this year is that, to me, the moratorium has actually been a success. The purpose of the moratorium was to limit the number of tavern licenses, which ABRA successfully enforced by not allowing anyone to put their applications in. And as a result of which, we had however many taverns would have applied and would have gotten open, did not in Adams Morgan. And to me, that's a success of the moratorium because, quite frankly, it's obvious that there are people out there who want to have tavern licenses in Adams Morgan. It's also clear to me that tavern licensees in general have very little responsibility toward the community as opposed to restaurants, in that they're not providing any services that are, truly needed, desired, wanted by the community. What they're doing is providing large quantities of alcohol to people without providing food, and putting them in a situation where it's much more likely that they're going to become inebriated and they're going to do things that are detrimental to the residents who live in the neighborhood. And every single weekend, there are people coming up sort of in hordes from the bar scene down on 18th along my street that disturb the peace and quiet of the street. And, you know, there's a certain amount of that I'm quite willing to put up with to have the vital business community that we do have in Adams Morgan. But to suggest somehow it's going to improve Adams Morgan to add tavern licenses when we have as many tavern licenses as we do, is just beyond credibility to me. I don't understand why people would suggest that that would be a benefit. I haven't heard anything from anyone in support of that. And in addition, I'd point out that there are vast numbers of storefronts that are empty throughout the district, whether or not there's a moratorium zone in place or not. We're struggling through some challenging times economically in commercial areas, but the solution is not to put a bunch of alcohol-only establishments. We have more than enough restaurants, more than enough taverns, and the moratorium has been quite successful and should be continued as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And do we have, let me see, Jean Stewart? Stewart, if you have,
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you have,
Good.
do you-
Yes,
do you
I
have a
have
camera
technical
running?
troubles with
Okay.
the sound on my computer too. I am using closed captioning. But thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. And good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I've been a resident in Adams Morgan for over 53 years. And I remember, as the previous witness said, the bad old days when it was mostly Party City, and have welcomed more diverse businesses. I also am a member of the executive committee of the Kalorama Citizens Association, and I am testifying in support of extending the Adams Morgan moratorium zone as currently established for another 5 years, and in opposition to the proposal from the ANC. And despite the current limit of 10 CT licenses in the moratorium zone, there are already 16 tavern licenses, down slightly from the 18 we had in 2006. Expanding the number of licenses to 25 under the proposal would be 20 in the first year, I believe is totally unnecessary. There are plenty of places for we residents to go and drink if we want to. We don't need more. Taverns are basically bars, as there is no requirement to serve any kind of food other than bar snacks. And the neighborhood just really doesn't need any more of these types of businesses. We have plenty. We have, you know, a really over concentration of taverns with attendant disturbances of the peace, order, and quiet. This spoils the quality of life for those of us who live here, and it's just very unpleasant for our residences. We are a mixed residential and commercial neighborhood, but due consideration for the large component of those of us who live here, and should mean less commotion. Commotion sometimes involving vandalism and violence, not more. More taverns in this compact zone would also lead to still more traffic, with attendant negative impact on vehicle and pedestrian safety and residential parking requirements. What Adams Morgan needs, as previous witnesses have said, is more businesses that serve actual needs of residents. Cleaners, pharmacies, coffee shops, restaurants, bakeries, that sort of thing. And I would hope that that the BID and ANC might explore small business incubators at other neighborhoods have had to encourage a diversity of businesses in Adams Morgan. Anyway, for these reasons, I urge the board to reject the proposal of ANC 1C and instead to continue the moratorium zone with its cap of 10 CT licenses for another 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. I see there's a, Ms. Stewart, can you please mute your phone, please, ma'am? Yeah, thank you. I see there's a Larry Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove, do you wish to speak? I guess not. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify today that I have not called? Did anyone identify themselves in the chat, Mr. Oriana?
Well, there was a Julie who offered her time for everyone else. She could be elevated if she wishes.
No, I think she had said she doesn't want to speak, so she was just listening. So if that's, I just want to make sure that I've covered the universe of everyone who wants to speak. Okay, fine. I just have a couple, and I'm asking the same question to everyone. I mean, currently in Adams Morgan, there are 52 active restaurants. One is in safekeeping, 4 pending. There are 15 active CT license, which exceeds the current cap of 10. And of course, I see that everyone wants to continue the nightclub. So let's start with the ANC. I know that the ANC have proposed that we raise the cap to 25. So I guess what I'm just trying to find out from, were you aware that although the cap is currently 10, that there's actually 16 CR license currently in use in the neighborhood?
The question was for me, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm starting with you, sir.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're definitely aware. That was a point that we discussed quite a bit. I mean, 25, like I said, an arbitrary number. I mean, really, the discussion was just, I guess, two-part. Should there be consideration on the ANC's part to suggest that some sort of change towards slightly less stringent regulations should be considered? And then, if so, to what degree do we want to recommend that change? Like I said, 25 was a compromise because we recognize that the number currently is 16. It has to go back down to 9 until a new application can come through for a 10th. 25 is higher than both those numbers. Not a magic number, something that we just thought was a useful placeholder and relatively reasonable considering the, I don't know, somewhere between 6 to 10 hours of meetings that we had.
Sure. And Mr. James, the same question for you. I know that you're asking us to maintain the current cap. With the current cap, there's 10, but there's actually, as I stated before, there are actually 15 in active. So how do you propose the board should address that issue?
Well, am I heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Seeing that the number has not changed, let's put it this way. Since the cap was put in place in 2006, the number has never approached 10. That was set, and it was set up in a way that no further taverns can be issued until the number goes below 10. Then you could issue 1. So the cap was not going to disappear if the number changed. It was a protection for the community. So the idea of having 2.5 times the number of the cap, which the 25 that the ANC thinks might be acceptable, is ludicrous. I'm trying to think of a word that isn't too nasty, but it would just put way too much pressure on the residential community And it's not good for the business community either. Restaurants don't need a whole lot of rough taverns around them that cause disturbance and violent incidents late at night. The board has within its ability to look at all the investigative histories of taverns over time. They're long and very serious. And I'm not going to go into it, but I will I think I'm going to submit those to you as evidence before the end of tomorrow. It just repetitive problems, fighting, police being called. One of the things you see from a police report is often, person taken to hospital. Well, gosh, I guess they, had a hangnail. No, they got in a fight because they were all drunk because they were overserved in a tavern. This is the kind of thing we've dealt with for a very long time. And the ANC is like saying, oh, well, we need more diverse types. And the bid is saying, oh, well, we have to get this tavern license for a bookstore. They can give away alcohol. It's legal to do so. Or they could institute a charge at the bookstore to participate in their book clubs. But no, everything that is protecting the residents should be given away. The only reason that I've heard out of this ANC and the bid, is so that a bookstore could have a tavern license. And then what would stop that bookstore from selling that tavern license to somebody who actually wants to run a tavern in a building that is a full-blown tavern? Who knows? It's just, that would be a just ridiculous path to go down. And it's just beyond belief, that such things would be suggested in a serious way. Again, I would like to just say that we deal in a very constructive way with settlement agreements. Historically, the Calorama Citizens Association and the ANCs over time have worked together, not always agreeing perfectly, but, we wind up coming up with a position for a particular settlement agreement for a particular establishment. But that's not the only thing. The ABRA investigators, ABCA now, are not standing in front of that establishment 24 hours a day saying if anything goes wrong. You have to be there to note that there's a problem. And there's lots of problems that there aren't enough investigators to see, or MPD. We have very sparse MPD coverage in this neighborhood nowadays. When the shooting occurred on December 17th, the tavern owner, Bill Duggan, was out on the sidewalk and was saying, I looked around and there was no police anywhere to be seen. This came out of air. It's a restaurant. It wanted to be a tavern, but the people who owned the tavern at that previous location, Songbird, didn't want to sell to air. They sold to somebody else. So, we have people coming to Adams Morgan with guns and who knows what else. That's not good for the community. And while air is not a tavern, but we have lots of restaurants that act quite a bit like nightclubs because they have an entertainment endorsement, cover charge, music, dancing, and while those things by themselves are not necessarily bad, when you get a large conglomeration of them, it's going to have an effect on the community, and it has, and that's why we've been here since the year 2000, seeking renewal for an effective moratorium. In the beginning, it was too much. It said no kind of any no license at all, no A's, no B's, that was too much. And we learned that it was, and we moved forward and became one that allows restaurants, which everybody can enjoy. Families with children can go and enjoy those, but not if the scene is too dangerous for those people to be attracted, or for a viable, open to everyone kind of restaurant to come here.
All right, Mr. James.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the chance to say all that.
Ms. Barden, you had your hand. You can lower your hand, please, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to mention a few things. I wanted to correct a few inaccuracies that I've heard this morning. First of all, Heaven and Hell no longer exists. That business was sold. Mahari no longer owns it. It's now called Moonlight DC. So any misconceptions about Heaven and Hell, it's no longer there. So And Air was not Songbird. Songbird was where the
Suggested it
Hotbed
was.
Comedy Club is now, and also the delightful Cafe Delight, which is owned by the Ukrainian sisters. And so I wanted to also kind of point out, you know, some of the places that do have tavern licenses. So that includes Hotbed that I just mentioned, the comedy club, Bedrock Billiards, which has been there for at least 30 years, the Imperial, which is down at Florida Avenue, Baja Tap, Roofers Union, both of which operate as restaurants, and then the very new Shanklin Hall, which just opened up as a community space where the Columbia Station used to be. So I just wanted to point out that many places that have tavern licenses operate like restaurants, and we've heard that there is interest in doing some more interesting concepts, like the bookstore being able to offer beer and wine. They would have to sell it, and the only way they can do that without a kitchen is by getting a tavern license. So, and they have to wait for, another business to close before they're able to do that. And even then, because of the moratorium, acquiring a tavern license is at least $75,000. And most small business owners can simply just not afford that. It's just beyond their reach. So that's really prevented unique, interesting concepts from even considering Adams Morgan, because that price point is just outside anybody's reach. So I just wanted to make a few clarifications.
Thank you. Hold on, Mr. Wood. I know that you've spoken before, so let me see if anyone else wants to address that issue. I also want to have the other board members ask questions, so just hold on a minute. But I will, before I close this hearing, Mr. Wood, I'll give you an opportunity to speak again. Do we have any questions from the board members? Go ahead, Mr. Short.
Thank you, Chairman. And good morning to all of the panelists and concerned citizens who've shown up for this moratorium, for this hearing. And I've heard as a board member on many occasions the concerns of the community, and my personal choice has always been that businesses and the community must learn or have to survive together. One can't survive without the other. So I would just like to say I've taken some notes, and I can see where Mr. Dennis James, what is your recommendation again to the board?
It would be to renew the existing conditions, but to not just for 3 years, but for 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to go to Miss Christine Barden. Your recommendation, Miss Christine Barden, for the board?
Our recommendation, our board voted in November to vacate the entire Adams Morgan moratorium zone, except for the exception on nightclub licenses.
This next question is for Mr. Ted Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie, can you give us your recommendation? Ted Guthrie? Okay, then I'll go to Ms. Jean Stewart.
My recommendation is to extend the moratorium as is for 5 years, not 3. And I would ask the board also to note the previous witness, a longtime resident who said going back to Adams Morgan as a party city will drive away residents, not attract them, like she noted in U Street. Thank you.
Thank you. And this question is for Ms. Leslie Degnan.
I'm sorry, who are you asking this question, Mr. Short?
Leslie Degnan.
Yes, thank you. Yes, my recommendation would be to extend the current moratorium for an additional 5 years. Thank you.
And this last question would be for ANC 1C03, Peter Wood.
What's the question?
What is your recommendation to the board?
Thank you.
I'm just asking as a board member,
Yeah,
before I vote on anything, I'd just like to get your opinion
perfect.
and why you're testifying today.
Yeah, so our entire ANC voted unanimously to suggest raising the limit on tavern licenses from 25, maintaining the moratorium on nightclub licenses, and maintaining the current status for restaurant licenses, which has no limit.
Thank you very much. And when were you elected to be on the ANC, and how long have you been the ANC with the ANC, active with the ANC?
That's in the written part of the testimony. I had to cut like half, but I've personally been, it's weird. I'm the longest tenured, but the tenure used to be significantly longer. So I was elected in November of 2020. So I've been a term and a half, 3 years or so, or no, a little bit under 3 years as commissioner,
Okay.
plus campaign and stuff.
Thank you very much, so that I don't hold up too much time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask questions. And thank you, panelists.
You're welcome. Oh, before we move on to, hold on, Mr. Grandis is next. Mr. Wood, did you respond? Did you state what you wanted to state when you had your hand raised the last time?
No, but I can wait to see if it gets addressed in questions first.
Okay,
There's just a couple following up from what Ms. Barden was saying.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Grandis.
Good afternoon, everyone. We all want to thank
I cannot hear you, Mr. Grandis, so I can't hear you clearly.
Chairman, is that better?
Just raise your voice up a little bit or turn your microphone up, sir, please.
About that. Better? Must be a technical thing because I have participants hear me or not?
We can hear you.
Mr. Wood, you, in your oral presentation, I didn't see it in the written, you used the term volatile. Remember, recollect using the term volatile when you spoke about taverns?
I remember using the word. I don't know if it was specifically towards taverns. I think it was, if I remember correctly, basically the volatility of the local business stability. And this is something that has been pointed out. Like I said, we had many discussions at public meetings on this, and then also just individually with constituents, that there's a lot of turnover. Like one of the points that was raised of why this proposal was not useful is because there's so many new restaurants coming in. And the point that we ended up really settling on is that that's actually reflective of that volatility. It's nice to have the new energy of new investors coming to the neighborhood, but it's a lot and it's constant, and it potentially has increased in recent years, probably partially because of the pandemic. But that volatility comes because there's limited options for what types of establishments can exist, and modifying that slightly could potentially reduce some of the volatility. Of course, it's a tough question, but that was a big point of when we discussed volatility, how we discussed it.
I want to thank you for clarification because this board, one of our responsibilities is public health and safety when we issue licenses, and we have our investigators do their routine investigations. So I was concerned that you were referencing that there's volatility in the violence, on the violence issue, not the voluntary, as you explained it. So I just wanted that clarification. Ms. Barden, it's good to see you. And we all want to thank you. And we appreciate your presentation today. Just for public record, I live on Swan at 18th. So let me just say, we get the benefit of late night Adams Morgan coming down the hill. So we're very familiar with that neighborhood. And Ms. Barden has done outstanding work as the executive director of that bid. And I know what the challenges are. I think she knows. We've all had these discussions and commitments. So I want to congratulate what the bid has done. Now, you mentioned in your testimony that the bid is interested in having other types of businesses come into Adams Morgan. And as you know, that's part of your charter, is to attract that. There's a perception, and I think it was brought up in this meeting, hearing, there's a perception that an ABC license, or more specifically, a tavern license, precludes another type of business being in that location. In your work, which is to bring in business, are you finding that the townhouses, the square footage, the stairs, the lack of storage space, are there other things that are prohibiting or makes it difficult or a challenge for a small business, leaving the internet world aside? Is that something you can speak to this board to explain? Is it the tavern license or ABC that's precluding new businesses?
I think it's one of the factors, for sure. The as you're mentioning, a lot of our commercial properties were former townhouses that were converted into commercial use. They are not Class A, commercial buildings with 12-foot ceilings and 10-foot windows. They are, they've been converted for commercial use. The Amsterdam Falafel Shop is, kind of a perfect example of that. So these are not traditional, Class A commercial buildings that are easy to attract retail, for sure. We've had a number of terrific retail stores come and go, simply because they outgrew the space, and they, I'm thinking about Violet, the adorable women's clothing store. She outgrew that space and moved to Georgetown, and then moved to Shaw after that. So as she continued to grow, Adams Morgan has been a place where a lot of entrepreneurs have chosen historically to start their business. We can go all the way back to Toys R Us. They got their start in what's now Adams Morgan. It was a hardware store, and he started making wooden toys for his children, and then grew that empire. So we have a long history of being a terrific neighborhood for entrepreneurs to get their start and to bring a new and interesting concept, which could be a wine bar, with jazz, but having that limitation on what the marketplace can invite is really difficult, and I think we could see some really interesting, unique concepts come in to Adams Morgan if they didn't have to spend $75,000 on a tavern license when one is available. And we've seen that is a hindrance to the creativity that's in the marketplace. And we think this is a perfect opportunity to open that up, and to see what entrepreneurs want to do. So I think there's some really creative concepts that are out there that we would love to have here to fill these vacancies. As we all know, Adams Morgan has suffered, through the pandemic closures, as has the rest of the city and the rest of the country. This is a unique opportunity, I think, to finally, be able to attract some really interesting concepts that could help bring this neighborhood back, out of the pandemic.
Well, thank you, Ms. Barton. I appreciate you adding to the record so that the board has more information about the business opportunities in Adams Morgan. Being where I live, I'm very familiar with north of DuPont Circle along Connecticut Avenue, and I think that suffers similar characteristics to 18th Street, where Adams Morgan is, in trying to get retail business in, because they do want to be in these neighborhoods. Adams Morgan has a national, people know it. So as DuPont Circle, as all the other neighborhoods that are full of townhouses. At the same time, some of these old structures are very limiting, and it's a challenge. And we appreciate, the bid, and Mr. James and his organization and the ANC working together on trying to bring additional types of businesses. Mr. James, I want to thank you for your testimony today. I've been very impressed with you for decades. As I say, I live at 18th and Swan, and you've been a real advocate for the residential community and you have brought some very good ideas on how to improve and moderate certain things. So I want to thank you for being so involved these many decades. I just asked, Ms. Barden, that question about the challenges of trying to get other retail. Have you or your organization, and this is not that you should have, but it would help in the record, have you tried to speak with, over these decades, small businesses to try to come in and finding out why they're not, renting these spaces?
Thank you for the kind words. Am I being heard again?
I can hear you.
Am I being heard? Oh, no, hey.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, I can hear you. No, I can't hear you, Mr. James. I don't know what you did.
Get it back on.
I can hear you now. No, I can't hear you, Mr. James.
He's muted himself.
I found a button and I pushed it. Now can you hear me?
Sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I don't know if he heard it, so I'll thank Mr. Grandis for the kind words again. And the Calorama Citizens Association is concerned with many different aspects of residential life in the city. So among the things that we've done over time are establish historic districts, which become somewhat of a tourist attraction, but also attract people who care about the history of the neighborhood. And for that reason, 18th Street is in the Washington Heights Historic District. And if it hadn't been, you wouldn't have the feel that it has now, which attracts people. They want to go to this groovy looking place. But unfortunately, it kind of got lost along the way and became more of a wild entertainment corridor. So if we hadn't done that work for historic preservation, you'd probably see a vastly different street with buildings torn down and different kinds of structures put in their place, because zoning would allow it in lots of places. Yes, as the president for too many years, I have approached different business owners about moving to Adams Morgan because I think they would be beneficial. For instance, I know the owner of Pizzeria Paradiso, who runs a very nice set of businesses, and she actually lived here in the neighborhood for quite a while. And she just said it was a little too rough for her. And other businesses that were here and then decided to leave because of the difficulties of high rent or the overall atmosphere not suiting what they want to do. Like Toro Mata was a wonderful Peruvian import store that was forced to leave by a massive rent increase. They didn't want to leave. And, I don't know what went on precisely with the rental. Landlords can do what they want. Violet, the store that Kristen Barden mentioned a moment ago, they left perhaps for monetary reasons, but specifically because they were directly above a very loud tavern called Tamari. And it's still there. And it's one of the board members of the bid, its owner is. And, I'm sure he's on that board to protect his interests. So it's a very, to use the word Mr. Wood said earlier, it's volatile, but it's not always just a good mix of different things happening. It's people wanting to keep it the way it is or expand the way it is because they think they can make more money out of it if we have additional taverns. And, it's not lost on me that Peter Wood was the ANC's representative to the bid in his prior term. And now the ANC has a different representative, So I just got to say, the ANC has a different representative this term to the bid, who also voted in favor of, this resolution, which is the ANC resolution, very similar to the bid's resolution. And it's also filled with inaccuracies. For instance, Glover Park did not do away with their moratorium. They renewed it. It just didn't show up in the ABC code book because you only renew that once per year. And so they were looking at old information. And, the Georgetown, the situation, the moratorium was allowed to expire, but not before the city council, at the Citizens Association of Georgetown and the ANC's request, put in protections into the code about a limit on the number of taverns and nightclubs. So, when the result is the same, sure, you can move away from a moratorium, but we've never seen that as a viable way forward in Adams Morgan for various reasons. I would love to see more innovative businesses that could come and live within the restaurant requirements. The easier of those, the $2,000 per seat of ABC board approved occupancy, is quite easy to meet. It's less than half of the 45% food requirement. So, one could have a wine bar with jazz. I'm not aware of anybody who ever wanted to come here to do that. We certainly have places that have jazz. And in fact, one of the taverns that Ms. Barden referred to is actually a restaurant, Shanklin Hall. It's not a tavern license. So, it's just a minor point, but I know I go on a bit, so I'll pause there. I'm happy to answer any other questions anybody might have. And I think Ted Guthrie was trying to get back on. I don't see his name listed, but he was having some kind of technical issues. He texted me. So thank you again.
He can log back on, Mr. James.
I encouraged him to do so, and I contacted your IT guy as well and tried to connect them. Hopefully he'll come back.
All right, that's fine. I think Mr. Grandis, I saw Ms. Barden raise her hand, and then Mr. Wood. I guess they wanted to respond to one of the questions that you were asking. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Mr. Grandis's question about a retail attraction, because I think it's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. So, Urban Dwell, which is an adorable home goods and gift store. They have women's clothing and jewelry and all kinds of gift ideas. Some of them are very Adams Morgan centric. We helped them find that space on Columbia Road when they came in there about 7 or 8 years ago. And they've done very well and survived the pandemic. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Urban Dwell, I urge you to check it out because it's a really cute store. But Toro Mata, the Peruvian furniture and hand goods store that Mr. James referred to, they left because the building sold. So, and that's also the case for the Amsterdam Falafel Shop that just recently closed. They also had to close because the building is for sale. So those are two examples of circumstances beyond their control. And I do know for certain that a wine bar was very interested in going into a building at 17th and Columbia Road in Jessica White's property. She was talking to a proprietor for better part of a year, and then gave up because they realized they couldn't get a tavern license, and there's no kitchen there, and there was no space to build a kitchen. But the wine bar with jazz concept, would have worked really nicely in that space. But instead, we now have a weed store in that space. So, landlords, yes, they have an incentive to try to get the most money they can from their rent, right? But we don't want to have all weed stores, and I'm not suggesting that we do. We have quite a few, but I don't want to see landlords have to take that option because they can't get an interesting, unique concept that would require a tavern license simply because there's no kitchen and no possibility of building a kitchen in a given space, right? Because these spaces are so unique and so, so different. So I wanted to make that clarification.
Go ahead, Mr. Wood, and then you can go back, Mr. Grandis. Go ahead, sir. You can lower your hand, please.
That's me. All right. So thanks. I won't be long. There were unfortunately quite a few inaccurate statements. I don't have time to address them all, but I think a few are worth mentioning. One, there's kind of the implication that the bid and the ANC1C had some sort of collaboration on creating our resolution because I was the representative at one point. It's completely false. Even if it was true, it's okay, but it's not. We're unpaid volunteers, and the only time we've ever even spoken off public meetings with the bid, it was on an issue that we disagreed with, a collection of commissioners and stuff, and it was completely unrelated to this. But more to the point of like relevant to our discussion, a few things stand out to me. One, I think much earlier on in this hearing, someone stated that the ANC's process was very inadequate in garnishing public input. I personally found that to be kind of an insulting comment. We went so far beyond what was expected of us for public comment that people commented to me that they were tired of talking about the moratorium zone because we had done it for so long. On multiple occasions, on multiple meetings, in multiple months, we had comments from people saying that they had voiced their opinions, that we had, I think, established that there was quite a diversity of opinion, and our job is to try to assess what that is. I also, independent of that, on my own, contacted many people who have been involved with similar discussions in the past and have had similar views, many of whom said that they have supported our resolution. Some of whom said they didn't want their name to be made public because the Colorado Citizens Association had harassed them in the past. So I respected their request for anonymity. But I really think that the main point here, because there was also a couple of things that people are moving out of U Street, which I don't know if that is actually statistically accurate. I just haven't looked at the data. And then also that we haven't seen any new applications for tavern licenses, so that must justify keeping the status quo. I think Ms. Barton kind of alluded to this. It's really expensive to try to apply for one to be transferred, and you have to wait for the number to lower. So the reason we haven't seen that is because they've been mostly amassed within a small group of actors who have mixed motives. Some have been probably more bad faith than others. Some have been very good faith. Some of the best constituents I have and neighboring commissioners have tavern licenses and are some of the best run businesses in our districts, if not in the neighborhood. And some of them you wouldn't even know if there was a bar there if someone didn't tell you because they're so well hidden. But really it brings, I think, to the deeper point that we discussed pretty exhaustively, which is I think everyone wants retail diversity. Everyone wants to have a robust local economy that is ideally locally owned, ideally diverse in terms of who's doing that ownership, ideally has longevity, and ideally does not depend on things like the sales of alcohol, cannabis, and the quote unquote vice economy. But we also realize that we don't live in an ideal world, so we have to make compromises if we're going to maintain a community and a neighborhood that works well together, which I think collectively we all do agree on that on this hearing and in my experience as a commission. But in order to do that, sacrifice is required, and it's hard. I admit. I think this hearing is kind of testament to that. It's probably not a coincidence that the people who have the most time and energy available to be involved in these discussions are people who are retired homeowners. I have to take off time from work just to speak here today, and most of my fellow commissioners and constituents couldn't even consider doing that. So I'm glad to be able to share these views, but I do want to make it clear that to the best of my ability, I've really tried to collect information from a wide range of people in the neighborhood. It's hard as a commissioner. We don't have a staff. We don't have much of a budget. It's volunteer. So really I'm trying, but I appreciate the chance to be able to kind of add on to that. And I did put some of that in my written testimony as well for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Were you done with your question, Mr. Brandon?
I just had one last statement, Mr. Wood. I think it's excellent that you reference one of the big public policies of the district is to encourage DC residents, to encourage small entrepreneurs the ability to get a storefront. And your neighborhood with the falafel shop is an outstanding example of having an excellent idea, going in, have no money, have a food truck. To have a food truck and to be able to show that product to the residents, to be able to have a brick and mortar location. I just want to reference that Adams Morgan has been an incubator of those type of things. So I just want to thank you all for taking time of your record of your work today to be able to give us your presentations. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are welcome, Mr. Grandis. Any other questions by any other board members? I see you raise your hand, but I want to bring this hearing to a close, Ms. Barden. But so, all right. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes to wrap up. And I will go back and basically I'll if you need to speak, I will. So what I'll do is that since we have no other questions by the board members, so I'm just going to have everyone I give you 2 minutes to wrap up, just to let us know what it is that you want the board to do, and then we'll move on from there. So let me find the timer so I can put this back on. So it's 2 minutes. I'm giving everyone 2 minutes, just 2 minutes to wrap up. And I'm going to go in the same order that I went before if you want to speak. So I'll start again with Mr. Wood.
Thanks. I'll be brief because I sort of already started my closing monologue. But I mean, I think that an important point for us to address here, which we've addressed as a commission, and I think really as a community, including groups that disagree with one another and individuals, is that Adams Morgan is unique. Adams Morgan is creative. We have a history of a lot of things. Of course, within those things comes conflict, but we tend to manage it well. And in that creativity, I think, is the need to adapt with circumstances. Like I said, the ideal scenario and the realistic scenario aren't necessarily aligned. So it's trying to find that middle ground to find what types of adjustments, what types of risks are worth taking. And we really went, in my mind, above and beyond as a commission to try to find compromise. It was unfortunate that the disagreeing voices were very much opposed to much compromise. And I'm glad that I was on a commission that really took a lot of that into consideration to try to find some sort of position that suggests that some types of modest changes are worth considering if we're trying to continue having a neighborhood that's worth living in. And I think it is.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. And Mr. Wood spoke for less than 2 minutes. Hint, hint to the rest of the other parties. Mr. James. Mr. James, I can't hear you, sir.
How about now?
Go ahead, sir.
All right. So I don't want to trade insults with anybody in this panel. I'll just say that the Calorama Citizens Association behaves properly in all situations. We have a long history of dealing with a very diverse group of licensees in as harmonious a way as possible, meaning when we go to seek a settlement agreement, for instance, we've dealt with every single ABC licensee, that means 70 that currently exist. So once in a while we can't agree and we go to a protest hearing over some serious point, but mostly we can come to terms. Anyway, the main points that I really want to stress in this last moment or so are the appropriateness requirements, which are document, which we got to you yesterday. There's about 15 photographs that show the incredibly sloppy dumpsters of many of the ABC establishments. There's a map that shows the density of ABC licenses on 18th Street, in particular, a cluster of taverns around the upper stretch of 18th Street. The description of all of the pedestrian safety and parking stressors that go on in the neighborhood. We have these folks who come in and ride their dirt bikes, off-road vehicles and so forth, most of which I understand from the police are illegal. That comes 2 o'clock at night sometimes and zooms around the neighborhood, blasting stereos as loud as can be, waking up residents. That's because there's a scene here that they want to be part of. 15 weed shops in the neighborhood. They're not legal. I think the board knows that because it's within your bailiwick now. They don't have basic business licenses. They don't pay taxes. They're cash businesses. They have armed guards sometimes. This is not safe for residents. We're experiencing a rash of armed robberies in the neighborhood, particularly around 18th and Columbia. There's been 7 within the last months. I think 3 with gun, and some of them, it's not certain whether there was a gun or not because the person who did it was not apprehended. And these occurred between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And the
Mr. James,
victims
I
are
need you to wrap
generally,
up, please.
okay, I'll just stop. You know, I'm going to provide the board all this information from MPD that I think will help inform its decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Barden?
Sure. So I'd just like to thank the board again for holding this hearing. And Ed, if I didn't thank you already, thank you for your kind words about my work here. It is been quite a while that I've been in this position, and some days are more challenging than others. But it is a labor of love for sure. So just like to reiterate that my board of directors would like the Adams Morgan moratorium zone to be vacated except for the prohibition on nightclub licenses. And as I emphasized in my written remarks, the ANC process, went on for 7 months, and we thought it was very extensive. And there were surveys, there were lots of meetings. They got a lot of feedback. And we thought that they, did an excellent job with that, and really took the time to consider lots of viewpoints. So, and I'd also like to point out, some of the newest businesses that have joined the Adams Morgan community, Manifest, which is the barber shop on Florida Avenue, that also has a speakeasy, Hotbed Comedy Club, Baja Tap. They've all been, terrific neighbors. And those are the types of businesses and entrepreneurs that we want in Adams Morgan, and we think that the community at large could really benefit from more of those types of, innovative, unique concepts. Many of which would need a tavern license simply because they don't have room for a kitchen. Or they don't have the ability to build a hood. I think I just like to emphasize that this is a unique moment. And I think with the board's support, opening up the tavern licenses will help attract, more unique businesses to the neighborhood and help fill some long-term vacancies. So, I know DC government's very interested in getting businesses back into empty storefronts. And this is a terrific way to make some significant strides in that direction. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, ma'am. Is Mr. Guthright, is he still available and want to say something? No? If the other members, if you want to speak, just raise your hand, please, and I'll call on you. If not, I'm going to close the hearing. I know it was, so if anyone else wants to speak, just raise your hand or make some comment. Okay, so go ahead, Ms. Delagran.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to summarize by saying that I do not think that the ANC proposal is a modest proposal. And I think it's a sad commentary that the only options for revitalization in the neighborhood involve drinking. I think that the vision of a bookstore with a happy hour or whatever is a wonderful vision. I fear that that is not the route that this is going to take, and that we will have a dozen more, or however many more, 10 more taverns which behave badly. So I would propose extending or recommend extending the current moratorium. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wants to speak? Who have not spoken already? Yeah, it appears that.
I can't get my video to work.
Go ahead, Ms. Stewart. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I just want to agree with the previous witness that especially if tavern licenses are that expensive, I don't think this is what's going to be attracted. It's going to be bars because they can make more money off of liquor than unique businesses or businesses that serve the needs of residents like me. It will just add to the noise and the conflict and possible attraction of non-residents who may be rather undesirable and will really damage the current attractiveness of our neighborhood, not improve it. It will just become back to Party City with trash and noise and at all hours of the night. And I just really oppose the idea that bringing in more taverns is going to improve the diversity of our businesses. I think it will do the opposite. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Miss. That was Jean Stewart. I see something in the chat. It says if the moratorium on tavern license is lifted, the price would be what ABCA sets. No, we do not set prices. The market sets the price. The market sets the price for a tavern license. In it's my understanding, I could be wrong, that the market sets the price for a tavern license in Adams Morgan based on the availability of license. So that's what so it's the availability of license that sets the price. The ABCA has no participation in the price of license. We charge a standard price for a tavern license or a nightclub license based on the numbers, but there's no specific charge for a license in any specific area. That's a market force issue. So I just want to
that was my point. Yeah, that was my point. If the moratorium on tavern licenses is lifted, it would just be the license fee. There would no longer be a marketplace for tavern licenses.
I just want to correct the record for that. Mr. James, you have spoken before. I mean, I'll give you half a second to speak if you want to say something, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's a technical question for the board. Is a tavern required to have a kitchen?
There's no food requirement for a tavern. It is just for restaurants have to serve food. So there are and one of the things I learned during COVID, there are a significant amount of restaurants out there, what we would consider restaurants that have tavern license, because for whatever reason they choose to have a tavern license. So, and during COVID, we had to make exceptions for certain establishments because they were truly restaurants but they elected for whatever reason to have a tavern license rather than a restaurant license.
Well, the definition says food, but doesn't say what or how much. So I thought maybe that a kitchen might still be required.
Yeah, there's no requirement in the sense that restaurants have to follow a certain percentage that restaurants have to serve in the combination of food and alcohol, while that doesn't exist for taverns.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I want to thank everyone for their active participation today. The record will remain open until August 4th, and the board will be issuing a decision prior to the expiration of the emergency rules in September. So we will issue a decision on whether or not we will maintain the moratorium for the number of years, and what establishment. I think that if there's no agreement within the parties, one thing that everyone agrees to is that they do not want nightclubs in Adams Morgan. So if we take nothing from this hearing in the sense of whatever decision, I believe that it's loud and clear from all the opinions that we have received that there is agreement amongst the parties that there should be no nightclubs, which are nightclub CN licenses in Adams Morgan. So that is loud and clear to the board. But we'll take the testimony today in consideration. We will also read all of the public comments that we have received, and we will make a decision based on the feedback we have received from the community. So thank you again for your participation in the hearing today. I believe I do not have to formally end this hearing because I did that yesterday. So thank you very much. Have a great day. I now direct all board members to return to, and so we'll take this matter under I'm sorry, Commissioner Jake, JAKEFALESCHINI from ANC 1C07. So I'm reckoning the hearing is over, but if you want to submit written testimony, you can do that. You have through August 4th, and it can be sent to abca.legal@dc.gov. Okay. All right. And all right. So we will take this matter under advisement, and thank you very much. I now direct all board members to return to executive session for further action. Have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.